the United States sends in ground forces, there's no turning back. It's all in. The sunk cost fallacy kicks in. It'll be another Vietnam for the United States because, first of all, America should not be in this war. America should have negotiated a peace treaty with Iran. America should have lifted all trade sanctions against Iran and allowed.
And so that's clearly a violation as well. You just go through the list of this, Piers, and I just don't think that Iran could be trusted. It's unfortunate, but that's the nature of the regime. It wanted a nuclear weapon, absolutely determined to get it, and it would lie and cheat and steal, which it did.
Mehdi Hassan, who's a regular on Uncensored, in which he said you're misleading people because you're not actually a professor. And secondly, he called you China's useful idiot. Here is your chance to respond to these two charges. What would you like to say?
Well, he's absolutely right. I am not a professor. I am not a credentialed professor. I'm a high school teacher with a pretty popular YouTube following. And it's the internet that has called me professor. In China, it's a sign of respect to call someone a professor, regardless of his credentials. So it's entirely up to you.
Look, you're about to watch a debate that perfectly captures everything broken about how we talk about war in this country. On one side, you've got Professor Jiang, a high school teacher who somehow sees the game more clearly than most credentialed foreign policy experts, explaining why America is walking into another unwinnable forever war. On the other side, you've got Gordon Chang, doing exactly what you'd expect, running interference for the military-industrial complex while pretending this is about Iranian trustworthiness. And here's the thing. Jiang called the Trump victory, called the Iran war, and now he's calling how it ends. And spoiler alert, it doesn't end well for us. But watch how the establishment brain, represented by Chang, just cannot accept that American empire might actually lose something. It's genuinely fascinating. Let's get into it.
What the Iranians have done by attacking its neighboring Gulf states has massively antagonized the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and others. They've gone after them in their most vulnerable areas, really, which are hitting the oil refineries and hitting tourist areas. There's been a 10% reduction in people defecting, not defecting, but leaving some of these Gulf states because they fear it's not safe anymore. If that was to continue that trend, or they stayed away irrevocably, you can see the whole business model of moving from reliance on oil, which is running out, to an economy through the Gulf states based on tourism, sport, entertainment, and so on. It becomes very difficult to sustain that if you don't have the people. So the stakes are pretty high here, aren't they?
It is possible that GCC does not survive this war. As you point out, the GCC is heavily dependent on expatriates, on international financing, and on global trade. And this war has shown that the GCC is really a mirage, created under the illusion that they will be protected by the American empire. In fact, we have the petrodollar system because the GCC had an agreement with America where the GCC would sell its oil in US dollars and recycle back into the US economy in exchange for American military protection. So not only did America start this war without their consent, but when this war started, the Americans abandoned their military bases and sought shelter in hotels, and that's why they were targeted by Iranian drones. So this was a very bad deal for the GCC, and I think it's very hard for them to survive this war, and that's why I think there's so much anxiety and pressure to launch a ground invasion against Iran.
When we spoke the last time you appeared on Uncensored, you were predicting that America would have to commit ground troops. Let's take a look.
Iran is putting a lot of pressure on the GCC, and I think at the end of the day, the United States will be compelled to send ground forces. Once the United States sends in ground forces, there's no turning back. It's all in. The sunk cost fallacy kicks in. It'll be another Vietnam for the United States because Iran is a mountain fortress. And the United States right now doesn't have the manpower, the manufacturing capacity, and the political will to fight a long war of attrition on the ground in Iran.
Now, you previously predicted correctly that Trump would win the election. You predicted the war with Iran. You also said that the United States would lose that war ultimately, and that remains to be seen. But on that specific prediction about the United States eventually having to commit troops, was that predicated on having to get the enriched uranium or in trying to effect a regime change?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a latter where it is impossible to effect regime change from the air. And it's not sustainable in the long term. We're already seeing American F-15s, F-35s being downed by the Iranians because, first of all, it's hard to maintain these expensive $100 million planes in a long war. And second of all, the Iranians are developing creative air defense strategies against the Americans. So eventually, if you want to continue this war, you're going to have to send in ground troops because it's too expensive to maintain an air war.
But the cost on human life from a ground invasion could be catastrophic, not just for the people who get killed, but also for the massive political fallout that would head Donald Trump's way. And of course, he has got the backdrop of the United States midterm elections in November.
If you go with the attitude that one American soldier is worth more than $100 million F-15 or F-35, you're going to lose this war.
Right. So what should the attitude be?
Well, first of all, America should not be in this war. America should have negotiated a peace treaty with Iran. America should have lifted all trade sanctions against Iran and allowed for civilian Iranian enrichment. And this would have brought global prosperity to the world. The Iranians were perfectly happy to abide by a nuclear treaty that they signed under Obama. And that treaty was going very, very well.
Okay, so here's what just happened that you need to understand. Jiang just laid out the entire class war dimension of this conflict that nobody in mainstream media will touch. He said the GCC, Saudi Arabia, UAE, all of them, they built their entire economy on a deal with American empire. Sell oil in dollars, recycle those dollars back into our economy, and in exchange, we protect you militarily. That's the petrodollar system. That's how it works. And then what did America do? Started a war they didn't consent to, and when Iran actually hit back, American troops literally abandoned their bases and hid in hotels. Like, that actually happened. Do you understand how devastating that is for the entire logic of American military dominance? The protection racket failed. The people paying for protection got bombed anyway. And Jiang's pointing out something else that's so obvious, but nobody says it. Maintaining an air war with $100 million planes is unsustainable. We're already losing F-15s and F-35s. Iran's developing countermeasures. So the only way to win, and I'm using that word very loosely here, is ground invasion, which would be Vietnam all over again, Afghanistan all over again, Iraq all over again. But here's where it gets really good. Watch what Gordon Chang does next. Piers asks him about the Iran nuclear deal, and Chang immediately pivots to Iran can't be trusted, they violated the JCPOA. Which is hilarious because the United States violated it first by pulling out under Trump. But more importantly, this is the move. This is what these guys always do. They take the conversation away from should we be in this war and who benefits from this war, and redirect it to can we trust Iran? It's a morality play. It's good guys versus bad guys. It completely erases the donor interests, the weapons contractor profits, the oil company stakes, the geopolitical chess game that has nothing to do with Iranian trustworthiness and everything to do with controlling energy markets and maintaining dollar hegemony. Jiang's doing material analysis. Who benefits? What are the actual costs? What does the evidence show about American capacity to win? Chang's doing narrative management. Iran bad, America good, trust the process. And that's the difference between someone who's actually thinking versus someone who's playing a role. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about this.
And that treaty was going very, very well. So first of all, this war should not have started. Now that this war has started, I think it's imperative that the Americans recognize that this war is lost, it cannot be won, and refuse to commit ground troops. Because once it commits ground troops, then this war becomes a sunk cost fallacy, mission creep. It'll be like another Vietnam. So right now, it's a turning point. I implore the Americans, do not send in ground troops. Once you send in ground troops, you're stuck there for 10 years.
Yeah, I think that's almost certainly true. I mean, Gordon Chang, that paints a pretty rosy picture of the Iranian regime, towing the line on the global stage. They've shown very little evidence they would do that. And in fact, of course, the whole point of the war from the Israeli point of view is that they've been the octopus providing the tentacles of terrorism to the Houthis, to Hezbollah, to Hamas, to terrorize Israel for several decades now. And that is why Israel wanted to neutralize that threat. And that is why Netanyahu worked so hard to persuade Donald Trump to bring America into it. I mean, do you think that the picture there that Professor Jiang paints of Iran being a reliable actor, perhaps if we'd done things differently, is that a likely scenario?
Yeah, I don't share it. So, for instance, with the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA that President Obama negotiated, we know that the Iranians violated it. And President Trump, when he pulled out, said he couldn't certify a compliance. And we know that the Iranians were stalling and preventing inspections, which were part of that plan. And that was a direct contravention of its obligations. So, no, I don't think Iran can be trusted. I'd like to think that they could, but at least on that one, and that's the most direct precedent that we have seen that they violated it. And by the way, they have 60% enriched uranium, which they admitted to. And so that's clearly a violation as well. You just go through the list of this, Piers, and I just don't think that Iran could be trusted. It's unfortunate, but that's the nature of the regime. It wanted a nuclear weapon, absolutely determined to get it, and it would lie and cheat and steal, which it did.
What is your prediction, Gordon Chang, for how this plays out?
Well, how it plays out is determined by one individual, President Trump. And I don't know. You're absolutely right when you say he's unpredictable. Now, we know what he says. I think that he is as good as his word on these issues for various reasons. He's been consistent about Iran not getting a nuclear weapon. He started this war, which he knew was going to be unpopular. So he's obviously determined to see it through. But, as I said, it's up to one individual, and we're just going to have to see. As I said, I think he's going to be as good as his word.
Finally, Professor Jiang, I couldn't let you go without mentioning an encounter you had with Mehdi Hassan, who's a regular on Uncensored, in which he said you're misleading people because you're not actually a professor. And secondly, he called you China's useful idiot. Here is your chance to respond to these two charges. What would you like to say?
First of all, he's absolutely right. I am not a professor. I am not a credentialed professor. I'm a high school teacher with a pretty popular YouTube following. And it's the internet that has called me professor. In China, it's a sign of respect to call someone a professor, regardless of his credentials. So it's entirely up to you whether or not to call me a professor. And the second point, that I'm a useful idiot, look, it is entirely possible that an algorithm is propping me up because I'm saying certain things that align with the interests of certain nation states, and I don't dispute that. My rise in the internet has been meteoric. It's surprised me, but I'm committed to education. I'm committed to free debate. I'm committed to free discussion. I am perfectly happy to engage with people on both the left and the right, and I think the path forward is open and free debate.
Yeah, I completely agree. Gordon Chang, what is your view of Professor Jiang? Are you happy to call him a professor? And do you think he's China's useful idiot?
Everything that Professor Jiang just said, I can certainly agree with him. I understand that title is something that people have given him, and that's fine with me. He has views. Some of them align with what the Communist Party of China believes. Some of them do not, as we just heard. He has his views, and I wouldn't characterize him with that useless idiot term. I think he just has views that both do align and don't align with the powers in China.
Yeah, which from where I sit is actually a pretty good place to be. I have the same about my own country and my own government. I agree with them about some things. I disagree with them about others. Last time I checked is actually a pretty good place for most people.
All right, so let's talk about what just happened here, because the ending is actually the most revealing part of this entire thing. Mehdi Hassan, who I love by the way, called Jiang out for not being a credentialed professor and for potentially being China's useful idiot. And you know what Jiang did? He just owned it. Yeah, you're right, I'm a high school teacher. The internet calls me professor. It's possible an algorithm is boosting me. My rise has been meteoric, and it surprised me. And then he said the only thing that actually matters. I'm committed to free debate and open discussion. Compare that to Gordon Chang, who spends his entire career as a professional China hawk, writing books predicting China's collapse that never happen, getting booked on every mainstream outlet to fearmonger about the yellow peril. And he won't even admit his own bias. He just says Jiang has views that align and don't align with China, which is the most meaningless statement I've ever heard. Here's the reality. Jiang doesn't have institutional backing. He's not funded by defense contractors. He's not on the CFR. He's not getting Raytheon money or Lockheed money or ExxonMobil money. He's a teacher with a YouTube channel who happened to predict a bunch of stuff correctly because he's doing actual material analysis instead of repeating State Department talking points. And that's exactly why he won this debate. He explained the petrodollar system. He explained why the GCC is panicking. He explained the impossibility of maintaining an air war and the catastrophic cost of a ground invasion. He connected it to Vietnam, to the sunk cost fallacy, to mission creep. He said what millions of people already know, but are too afraid to say. This war is unwinnable. It shouldn't have started, and the only reason it's continuing is because of donor interests and imperial hubris. Gordon Chang's entire contribution was, Iran can't be trusted, and Trump will see it through. That's it. No analysis of cost, no discussion of who benefits, no acknowledgement of the military-industrial complex, just vibes-based foreign policy dressed up as seriousness. And honestly, the fact that Piers ended on that note, agreeing that having your own independent views is a good place to be, tells you everything. Even he could see Jiang demolish this guy. So here's my question for you. Do you think someone without institutional credentials can actually analyze foreign policy better than the so-called experts? Because I think we just watched proof that they can. Let me know in the comments. If you're new here, welcome to Blueprint. This is what we do. We watch the debates the establishment doesn't want you to pay attention to, and we break down who's actually telling the truth versus who's running cover for power. Hit that subscribe button. I'll see you in the next one. Stay sharp.